Ji-won Kim stood at the viewing window of the transport ship as it approached Council Station. The massive structure looked like a crystal flower blooming in space, its transparent petals catching starlight from 3 different suns. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was happening, her stomach felt tight with worry. "First time seeing it?" asked Colonel Minho Park as he joined her at the window. His military uniform was crisp and clean, but Ji-won could see the tension in his shoulders. "Yes," she replied, not taking her eyes off the station. "It's beautiful. And terrifying." Dr. Yuna Lee approached from behind them, carrying a data pad filled with research notes. "The energy readings are incredible," she said, her voice full of scientific wonder. "Their technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of ours." Daeho Choi, their cultural expert, looked up from his own notes. "That's exactly what worries me," he said quietly. "When one side has all the power, negotiations become very one-sided." The transport ship docked with a soft thud. Ji-won straightened her formal diplomatic robes and took a deep breath. As Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, she carried the hopes and fears of 8 billion humans. The Council had been watching Earth for decades, and now they were finally ready to make contact. The airlock opened with a hiss. Beyond it stretched a corridor that seemed to be made of living light. The walls pulsed gently and the floor felt warm beneath their feet. Strange symbols floated in the air, probably showing directions in languages they couldn't read. A figure approached them from the far end of the corridor. It was tall and thin, with blue-tinted skin and 4 arms. Its face was almost human, but the eyes were too large and completely black. "Welcome, humans," it said in perfect English, though its mouth barely moved. The voice seemed to come from inside their heads. "I am Guide Kellen. The Council is eager to meet you." They followed Kellen through corridors that defied easy description. Sometimes the walls were solid, sometimes they seemed to be made of flowing water or dancing flames. Other beings moved through the passages, creatures so different from humans that Ji-won had to fight not to stare. "How many species are in the Council?" Minho asked, his military training making him catalog every detail. 12 founding species," Kellen replied, "plus 47 junior members. You would become the 61st species to join our great alliance." They entered a vast chamber where the ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared in mist. 12 thrones arranged in a circle dominated the space, each one different and strange. The beings sitting on them were even stranger. Council Prime Velthar rose from a throne that looked like it was carved from a single massive diamond. The being itself seemed to be made of the same crystal, tall and angular, with light flowing through its transparent body like liquid fire. "Humans," Velthar said, its voice ringing like struck glass. "We have watched your species for 93 of your years. You have shown remarkable progress, but also concerning tendencies." Ji-won stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Council Prime, we are honored by your invitation. Humanity has long dreamed of joining the galactic community." Another council member spoke up. This one looked like a flowing mass of silver liquid held together by some invisible force. "I am Counselor Nexus. Your species shows promise, but also dangerous independence. This must be corrected." "Corrected?" Yuna asked, unable to hide her confusion. Velthar gestured, and a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a thick document with hundreds of pages. "The membership accords," the crystal being announced. "These terms will guide humanity's integration into our peaceful order." Ji-won felt her heart sink as she scanned the floating text. The words were in English, but their meaning was clear and troubling. "This says we must surrender control of our military forces," she said carefully. "War is an outdated concept," another council member replied. This one looked like a giant insect made of metal and glass. "The council maintains peace. Individual species need no weapons." Minho's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His job was to observe and report, not to argue. "It also mentions genetic optimization," Yuna added, her scientific training making her focus on the technical details. Nexus flowed closer to them. "Your species has many flaws. aggression, unpredictability, excessive independence. These traits can be reduced through careful biological adjustment and population relocation, Deho said quietly, reading further into the document. 80% of Earth's people would move to designated worlds. For better integration, Velthar explained. Mixed colonies prevent the formation of troublesome cultural blocks. Your species will adapt more quickly when spread among existing populations. Jiwan looked at her team. She could see the same realization in their eyes that she felt in her heart. This wasn't an invitation to join anything as equals. This was a demand for surrender disguised as generous terms. These are significant changes, she said diplomatically. We would need time to discuss them with our government. Of course, Veltar replied, but there was something cold in its crystalline features. But understand that these terms are not negotiable. They have been carefully designed based on our experience with dozens of other species. The process is proven and necessary. As they were led to their quarters, Jiwan noticed other beings in the corridors. Some wore simple gray clothing and kept their eyes down. Others moved with the careful steps of people who had learned not to attract attention. In their assigned room, the 4 humans sat around a small table. The walls were transparent, giving them a view of space, but Jiwan wondered if they were being watched. They want to change us, Yuna said quietly. Not just our politics or our military. They want to change what makes us human. The population relocation is clever, Deho added. Scatter us among their existing colonies, and within a generation human culture disappears. Miho leaned back in his chair. This isn't negotiation, this is conquest with extra steps. Jiwan stared out at the stars, thinking of Earth and all the people counting on her. Then we need to find another way, she said. Because what they're offering isn't membership. It's extinction with a smile. Outside their window, Council Station continued its slow rotation, beautiful and terrible in the starlight. Somewhere in those crystal halls, 12 ancient species waited for humanity's answer, confident that the young upstarts from Earth would have no choice but to accept their generous offer. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. 3 weeks had passed since the humans first saw the membership accords. Jiwan spent her days in formal meetings with various council members, each session revealing more troubling details about humanity's proposed future. Dr. Yuna Lee worked in the council's medical research wing, supposedly learning about their advanced health care. What she actually discovered made her sick to her stomach. The genetic optimization process wasn't medicine, it was systematic personality modification. They showed me the brain scans, she told the others during one of their private evening meetings. Species that went through the process show reduced activity in areas linked to creativity, risk-taking, and independent thought. How reduced? Minho asked, though his expression suggested he already feared the answer. 70% average decrease, Yuna replied. They're not making people healthier, they're making them obedient. Daiho had been spending time in the cultural districts where junior council species lived. What he found there was even more disturbing. I met a Velani artist today, he said. Her people were once famous across the galaxy for their incredible sculptures and paintings. Were? Jiwan prompted. Now they only make approved art. Simple patterns, calming colors, nothing that might inspire strong emotions or challenging thoughts. She showed me pictures of old Velani art from before they joined the council. It was amazing, wild, passionate, alive. Now look. He pulled up an image on his datapad. The current Velani art was pretty but empty, like a beautiful flower with no scent. She told me something else, Deho continued. She said her grandmother used to tell stories about the old days, when Velani artists could paint whatever they wanted. But her grandmother died 20 years ago, and now no one remembers those stories. Minho had been observing the council's security forces and making disturbing discoveries of his own. The Krathen were warriors, he reported. Not just fighters. They had a whole culture built around honor, courage, and protecting the weak. Now they're decorative guards who carry weapons that don't work. Don't work? Jiwan asked. The weapons are fake, pretty metal sticks that light up but can't hurt anyone. The Krathen I talked to don't even remember how to fight anymore. 3 generations of genetic optimization have turned warriors into parade soldiers. But it was Jiwan's own discoveries that disturbed her most. During a formal dinner with several council members, she had asked about species that refused to join the council. "Oh, there haven't been any refusals in over 400 years," Council Prime Velthar had replied, with something that might have been amusement. "Young species sometimes need time to understand the benefits of membership. But what if a species simply preferred to remain independent?" Jiwan had asked. The crystal being's light had dimmed slightly. "Independence is an illusion, Ambassador. In this galaxy, there are only 2 choices: join the council or face the consequences of isolation." "What kind of consequences?" "Trade embargoes, navigation restrictions, technology sanctions. Eventually, most species find that cooperation is the only logical path forward." Now, sitting in their quarters, the 4 humans faced an uncomfortable truth. The council didn't just rule through military might. They controlled the galaxy's entire infrastructure. Trade routes, communication networks, resource distribution, everything flowed through council systems. "It's brilliant," Minho admitted grudgingly. "They don't need to invade anyone. They just make it impossible to survive outside their system." "Until now," Yuna said quietly. The others looked at her. "What do you mean?" Jiwan asked. "I've been studying their technology. It's advanced, yes, but it's also stagnant. They haven't made any real innovations in centuries. Why would they? When you control everything, you don't need to improve anything." "So?" Daiho prompted. "So maybe there's another way. What if we could build our own systems? Our own trade routes, our own technology?" Minho shook his head. "Even if we could, where would we go? They control all the inhabited star systems." "Not all of them," Yuna replied. "Just the ones that matter for their current civilization. There are billions of star systems in the galaxy. Most of them have never been explored." Jiwan felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. "You're talking about leaving everything behind." "Everything except ourselves," Yuna corrected. "Our technology, our culture, our freedom to choose our own path." That night, Jiwan couldn't sleep. She stood at the window looking out at the stars and thinking about Earth. 8 billion people going about their daily lives unaware that their entire future hung in the balance. Children playing in parks, artists creating new works, scientists pushing the boundaries of knowledge, all of it at risk of being slowly, gently erased. The next morning brought another formal negotiation session. Council Prime Velthar and several other members sat across from the human delegation in a room that looked like the inside of a soap bubble. "Have you reached a decision?" Velthar asked, its crystalline voice carrying a note of impatience. "We need clarification on several points," Jiwan replied carefully. "The genetic optimization process, how long does it take?" 3 generations. "For full integration," Nexus answered. "Your children's children will be much happier and more stable than current humans." "And the cultural preservation programs?" Daiho asked. "Human traditions will be maintained in appropriate forms, a spider-like," council member replied. "Modified for safety and social harmony, of course." "Safety?" Jiwan pressed. "Many human cultural practices encourage dangerous thinking," Velthar explained. "Competitive sports, dramatic arts, historical narratives about warfare and struggle. These create unnecessary stress and social friction." Jiwan nodded as if she understood. Inside, her heart was breaking. They wanted to take everything that made humans human and file off all the interesting parts until only a smooth, safe shell remained. "We appreciate the Council's generous offer," she said finally. "But we need more time to present these terms to our people." "How much time?" Velthar asked. 6 months. "Excessive." 2 months. 4 months, Jiwan countered. "Acceptable," Velthar agreed. "But understand, Ambassador, that this offer will not remain open indefinitely. Other young species are also under consideration for membership." After the meeting, as they walked back to their quarters, Minho spoke quietly. 4 months isn't enough time to evacuate a planet." "No," Jiwan agreed. but it might be enough time to prepare for something else entirely. That evening, she composed a carefully worded message to Earth. To anyone monitoring their communications, it would look like a routine diplomatic report, but hidden in the formal language was a message that would change everything. It was time for humanity to consider options that no other species had ever dared to attempt. It was time to think about leaving the established galaxy entirely and building something new among the unexplored stars. The Council believed they had humanity. Trapped between submission and isolation, they were about to learn that humans could imagine a third choice, one that had never occurred to beings who had spent millennia thinking inside the boundaries of their perfect, controlled civilization. Freedom was possible. It would just require leaving everything familiar behind and trusting in humanity's greatest strength, the courage to face the unknown. The emergency session of the United Earth Government took place in Geneva, but representatives from every nation and colony joined through secure quantum links. President Hye-jin Song sat at the head of the great circular table, her face grave, as she listened to Ji-won's full report. "Let me make sure I understand," President Song said after Ji-won finished speaking. "The Council's offer is essentially cultural suicide," with a smile. "That's correct, Madam President," Ji-won replied via hologram from Council Station. "They don't want humans as partners. They want us as pets." Chancellor Beomsu Kang from the European Federation leaned forward. "But the alternative is complete. Isolation from galactic civilization. No trade, no technology sharing, no protection from hostile species." "What hostile species?" asked General Subin Yu, commander of Earth's unified military forces. "According to our intelligence, the Council has eliminated or absorbed every military threat in known space that we know about," Kang replied. "There could be dangers beyond Council space. There could be opportunities too," said Dr. Yuna Lee, joining the discussion from her research station. "I've been analyzing Council technology. Yes, it's advanced, but it's also incredibly dependent on centralized systems. They've built their entire civilization around the idea that everything must flow through their networks." President Song studied the data streaming across her display. "Dr. Lee, in your professional opinion, could humanity develop independent technology systems?" "Not just develop," Yuna replied, her excitement clear even through the hologram. "Improve upon them. The Council's technology is stagnant because they haven't faced real challenges in centuries. Human innovation works best under pressure." The debate continued for hours. Representatives from Mars Colony and the Jupiter mining stations expressed concern about abandoning their investments in local space. The African Union worried about the cost of such a massive undertaking. The Asian Economic Zone questioned whether humanity had the resources for such an ambitious project. Finally, President Song called for quiet. "Ambassador Kim, what is your recommendation?" Ji-won took a deep breath. Even across the light years, she could feel the weight of 8 billion people's futures pressing down on her. "Madam President, I recommend we politely decline the Council's offer and begin immediate preparations for strategic withdrawal from all Council-monitored space." "You're talking about abandoning Earth," Kang said, his voice shocked. "No," Ji-won replied firmly. "I'm talking about taking Earth with us." The room fell silent. It was General Yu who spoke first. "Explain." Colonel Minho Park activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's structure. "Earth sits at the edge of Council space," he said. "Beyond us lies the galactic rim, billions of star systems that have never been explored or claimed. We wouldn't abandon Earth," Ji-won continued. "We'd move everything. Our industries, our research stations, our cultural centers. We'd build mobile habitats and generation ships. We'd take our entire civilization and establish it beyond the Council's reach." "The logistics alone," Kang began, "are challenging but possible," interrupted Admiral So-young-nam, joining from Luna Command. "I've been running preliminary calculations. If we mobilize every available resource and work around the clock, we could evacuate the majority of human civilization within 2 years." "Evacuate to where?" asked the representative from South America. Engineer Taehyun Lim brought up a star chart. Long-range probes have identified 17 potentially habitable systems within 50 light-years of the galactic rim. With our improved FTL technology, we could reach them in months rather than decades. President Song leaned back in her chair. This is the most audacious plan in human history. We're talking about abandoning 10,000 years of terrestrial civilization to start over in empty space. Not empty, Daeho Choi said from Council Station. Free. There's a difference. The debate resumed, but something had shifted. Instead of arguing about whether they should accept the Council's terms, they were discussing how to accomplish the impossible. Dr. Yuna Lee presented her research on FTL improvements. I've learned enough about Council technology to make significant advances in our own systems. We could build ships twice as fast as anything the Council has ever seen. What about resources? Asked the mining representative. Ships that size would require enormous amounts of materials. We strip mine the asteroid belt, General Yu replied. Complete resource extraction. If we're leaving anyway, we might well take everything useful with us. And Earth itself? President Song asked. Ji-won smiled for the first time in weeks. We leave it as it is. A monument to human origins, protected by automated systems. Anyone who visits will find a simple message. We have chosen our own path among the stars. The final vote came after 3 days of debate. By a margin of 73%, the United Earth government voted to reject the Council's offer and begin immediate preparations for the Great Departure. Within hours, the most massive mobilization in human history began. Factories across Earth and the colonies shifted to crash production of ship components. Scientists who had spent decades studying theoretical physics suddenly found unlimited funding for practical FTL research. Engineers designed modular cities that could be assembled in space and moved between star systems. The project had 1,000 names in its early days, but eventually, everyone simply called it the Departure. There was no need for more description. Everyone knew what it meant. President Song established the Departure Authority with extraordinary powers to coordinate the effort. General Yu took command of the military aspects, while Admiral Nam handled logistics and transport. Dr. Lee led the technology development teams, and Engineer Lim designed the mobile habitats that would become humanity's new homes. The work was staggering in scope. Entire cities were disassembled and prepared for transport. Cultural treasures from every nation were carefully packed and loaded onto special preservation ships. Even Earth's ecosystems were preserved, with DNA samples and living specimens from every known species secured in biopods. But perhaps the most important work was psychological. Humanity had to believe that they could survive and thrive in the unknown. Daeho Choi led teams of historians, artists, and storytellers in creating a new narrative for human civilization, not as refugees fleeing oppression, but as explorers choosing freedom. "We're not running away," became the motto of the Departure movement. "We're running towards something better." The Council, monitoring human activities through their standard observation posts, noticed the increased industrial activity, but dismissed it as typical human inefficiency. Young species often built unnecessary infrastructure while adjusting to the reality of Council membership. They had no idea that humanity was preparing to do something no species had ever attempted, voluntarily leaving galactic civilization to build their own among the stars. In her final diplomatic message to Council Station, Ji-won began laying the groundwork for humanity's polite but firm rejection. She needed to buy time for the departure preparations while keeping the Council from suspecting humanity's true intentions. The clock was ticking, and humanity was racing toward the greatest adventure in their species' history. 2 years after the Great Departure began, Admiral So-young Nam stood on the command deck of the flagship New Earth, watching the final preparations unfold across human space. Through the massive viewport, she could see thousands of ships of every size and purpose. Massive arc ships carrying entire cities, sleek escort vessels, huge cargo haulers loaded with everything from factories to works of art. "Final status report," she called out. "First fleet ready," reported Captain Dong Hyono from the exploration vessel Pathfinder. 3 billion people loaded and secured, all systems green. "Second fleet standing by," came another voice. Industrial platforms and manufacturing systems fully loaded. Third Fleet ready for departure, announced Captain Jihaiseo from the Cultural Preservation Ship Memory Keeper. All historical sites, museums, and libraries secured. Admiral Nam nodded and opened a channel to Earth. Command, this is Departure Fleet. We are ready to begin the final phase. President Song's voice came through clearly despite the vast distance. Admiral, you have full authorization. Execute Operation Freedom. The Great Departure had taken exactly 23 months, 7 days, and 14 hours to complete. In that time, humanity had accomplished what the Council considered impossible. They had packed up their entire civilization and prepared to move it beyond the reach of galactic authority. The numbers were staggering. 7 billion humans were aboard the massive ARC ships, living in cities that had been carefully disassembled on Earth and rebuilt inside mobile habitats. Every major cultural site had been preserved. The pyramids, the Great Wall, the temples of Angkor Wat, all secured in special transport vessels. Entire universities had been moved intact, their libraries and laboratories ready to continue human learning among the stars. Beginning jump sequence, Admiral Nam announced. All ships follow your assigned routes. Remember, we maintain radio silence until we reach the rally point. The first ships to move were the scout vessels, racing ahead. To secure the new systems and establish communication networks, Captain O's Pathfinder led a squadron of exploration ships toward the galactic rim, their advanced sensors scanning for any signs of Council pursuit. Behind them came the massive ARC ships. These vessels were marvels of human engineering, each one large enough to hold a major city, complete with parks, schools, hospitals, and entertainment districts. The ships could operate independently for decades while their populations lived normal lives inside them. Dr. Yuna Lee watched from the research vessel Innovation as Earth began to shrink behind them. The planet looked peaceful and unchanged, its blue oceans and white clouds exactly as they had always been. Only someone who looked very carefully would notice the automated defense satellites now orbiting the world, ready to protect humanity's birthplace from anyone who might try to claim it. How does it feel? Asked Engineer Taehyun Lim, joining her at the observation window. Like we're being born, Yuna replied, leaving the womb behind but taking everything that made us who we are. The departure had required innovations that pushed human technology far beyond anything the Council had achieved. The new FTL drives could move ships 3 times faster than Council vessels, and they didn't require the standardized navigation networks that kept other species dependent on Council infrastructure. More importantly, the mobile habitats could link together to form temporary cities at any star system, then break apart and move on when resources were exhausted or when it was time to explore new regions. Humanity wasn't just moving to a new home. They were becoming truly nomadic, able to thrive anywhere in the galaxy. On Council Station, the first signs of humanity's departure were noticed by routine monitoring systems. Council Prime Velthar was reviewing standard reports when an alert appeared on his crystalline interface. Significant decrease in human energy signatures, the report stated. Population centers showing 70% reduction in activity. Velthar accessed the detailed scans. The images showed cities that appeared normal from space, but with drastically reduced heat signatures and electromagnetic activity. It looked as if most of the human population had simply vanished. Counselor Nexus, Velthar called out. Review these readings from the human homeworld. The flowing silver being examined the data with growing confusion. This suggests a massive population decline, disease, war, natural disaster? Unknown, Velthar replied. But their deadline for accepting membership is in 3 days. Perhaps they are consolidating their population centers in preparation for integration. Neither of them considered the possibility that an entire species might simply leave. In 4,000 years of Council history, no one had ever tried such a thing. The truth became clear only when Ambassador Jawan Kim's final message arrived at Council Station. She appeared on the main display, standing in what looked like the bridge of a starship. Behind her, through a large window, stars moved, past at impossible speeds. Council Prime honored members, she began with formal courtesy. I am honored to deliver humanity's final response to your generous offer of membership. Velthar leaned forward, expecting either acceptance or a plea for better terms. After careful consideration, humanity must respectfully decline council. Membership, Jiwan continued. We are grateful for your invitation, but we have chosen a different path. The council chamber fell silent. 12 ancient beings who had never heard the word no from a younger species sat in stunned disbelief. We harbor no ill will toward the council or its members, Jiwan went on. We simply believe that different species may thrive best under different systems. We have decided to seek our fortune beyond the boundaries of established space. Impossible, Counselor Nexus whispered. No species can survive outside our networks. But Jiwan wasn't finished. To demonstrate our peaceful intentions, we are leaving Earth unchanged and undefended. Anyone who wishes to visit our homeworld is welcome to do so. You will find it exactly as it always was, with one addition, a simple message explaining our choice. The transmission ended, leaving the council staring at empty space where the human ambassador had stood. Velthar immediately ordered ships to investigate the human colonies. What they found defied everything the council thought they knew about galactic civilization. The colonies were empty but intact, with automated systems maintaining basic functions. In the major population centers, holographic displays showed the same message. The human species has chosen freedom over security, uncertainty over control. We go to find our own way among the stars. Earth remains as a monument to our origins and a testament to the power of choice. May all who visit here remember that the greatest journey begins with a single step into the unknown. By the time the council fully understood what had happened, humanity's ships had already passed beyond the range of their sensors. 7 billion people, their entire civilization, their technology and culture and dreams, all of it had vanished into the vast darkness beyond the galactic rim. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council faced a situation they had no protocol for handling. A species had looked at their perfect system and said simply, "No, thank you. We'll find our own way." As Admiral Nam's fleet jumped toward their new future, the Council sat in their crystal chambers and tried to understand how they had failed so completely to anticipate the impossible. Humanity was free, and the galaxy would never be the same. 50 years had passed since the Great Departure, and the galaxy was changing in ways the Council had never imagined possible. Council Prime Velthar stood in the emergency session chamber, his crystalline form dimmer than it had been in decades. Around him, the other Council members displayed various signs of distress. Counselor Nexus flowed more slowly than usual, and the insect-like member's wings buzzed with nervous energy. "Report," Velthar commanded. Council Historian Keth, an ancient being whose species had been among the Council's founders, activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's outer regions. "The situation continues to deteriorate," Keth said, his voice heavy with centuries of weariness. "In the last decade alone, we have lost contact with 43 junior member worlds." "Lost contact?" Velthar asked, though he already knew the answer. "They have departed," Keth replied simply, "following what they call the human path." The display zoomed in on various sectors where empty worlds spun in space, their populations gone, their cities abandoned except for automated systems and messages similar to the one humanity had left behind. "The Vellani were the first," Keth continued. 5 years after the humans disappeared, their artists began creating unauthorized works, music, sculptures, paintings, all depicting themes of freedom, exploration, and choice. When we attempted to restrict these activities, 70% of their population simply left. "Impossible," Nexus protested, the same word the Council had been using for 50 years. "They don't have the technology for independent space travel." "They do, now," Keth replied grimly. "Human technology has been spreading through underground networks, ships, FTL drives, navigation systems, all shared freely with any species willing to leave Council space. The historical records showed the pattern clearly. First, the Vellani artists, inspired by human independence, had begun creating works, that celebrated freedom. Then the Krathan warriors had started remembering their old songs of honor and courage. The Zephyrian technicians had begun innovating again, developing improvements to systems they had only maintained for centuries. Each time the Council tried to restore order, more species simply packed up and left for the galactic rim where humanity had established what they called the Free Worlds Confederation. The humans are not conquering anyone, Keth explained. They're not even recruiting. They simply exist as proof that there is another way to live. Velthar activated his personal interface and reviewed the intelligence reports. The news was uniformly disturbing. Beyond Council space, humanity had not only survived, but thrived. Their mobile cities had grown into permanent settlements around carefully chosen star systems. Their technology had advanced at rates that made Council scientists envious. Most troubling of all, they had kept their promise to remain peaceful. Not once in 50 years had human ships entered Council space without permission. They traded freely with anyone who approached them, defended themselves when necessary, but never showed the slightest interest in conquest or revenge. What did the other species say about the humans? Velthar asked. They call them the first free, Keth replied. The species that proved independence was possible. A new voice entered the discussion. Council Prime, we have an incoming transmission. The chamber's main display activated, showing a human woman with gray hair and kind eyes. Behind her stood several other figures representing different species, Vellani, Krathan, Zephyrian, and others the Council barely recognized. Council members, the woman said with respectful courtesy. I am President Minjung Yoon of the Free Worlds Confederation. I believe you knew my predecessor, Jiwon Kim. Velthar's light flickered with recognition. This was the first direct communication from humanity in 50 years. We are transmitting this message to inform you of a decision reached by our member species, President Yoon continued. The Confederation Council has voted to extend an invitation to any Council species wishing to join our alliance. The Council chamber fell absolutely silent. Our terms are simple, Yoon went on. Each species maintains complete autonomy over their internal affairs. Military cooperation is voluntary. Cultural preservation is guaranteed. No species is required to modify their biology, their society, or their beliefs to join us. She paused, letting that sink in. We offer this invitation not because we need more members, but because we believe in choice. The same choice that led humanity to leave Council space 50 years ago. The transmission showed scenes from free world space. Cities that combined human architecture with Vellani artistic flair. Krathan honor guards training alongside human soldiers. Zephyrian engineers working with human scientists to develop new technologies. We have learned that strength comes not from control, but from voluntary cooperation, President Yoon said. Not from making everyone the same, but from celebrating what makes each species unique. Then came the most shocking statement of all. This invitation extends to the founding Council species as well. You would be welcomed as equals, with no restrictions. On your autonomy and no requirements to change your nature, we harbor no resentment for past policies. We understand that you believed you were creating peace and order. Velthar found himself unable to speak. Around him, other Council members showed similar shock. We will leave this invitation open indefinitely, Yoon concluded. But we understand if you prefer your current system. Not every species is ready for the responsibilities that come with true freedom. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. It was Keth who finally spoke. They have done it, he said quietly. They have created exactly what we claimed was impossible. A galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than hierarchical control. How? Nexus asked, his silver form rippling with confusion. By trusting that intelligent species, given real choices, will generally choose cooperation over conflict, Keth replied. By proving that peace doesn't require uniformity. Velthar accessed the Council's internal reports. The data was clear. Council space was slowly emptying as species discovered they had options. Meanwhile, the free worlds grew stronger with each passing year, their technology advancing, their cultures flourishing. their people apparently happier than anyone in council space had been for centuries. "What do we do?" one of the council members asked. Velthar looked around the chamber that had housed the galaxy's rulers for millennia. The crystal walls reflected his dim light, and for the first time in his long existence he wondered if their perfect order might actually be a perfect cage. "We have a choice to make," he said finally. "We can continue as we always have, ruling over an ever-shrinking domain. Or, Nexus prompted. "Or we can remember what we originally set out to build," Velthar replied. "Peace, prosperity, and cooperation among all species." He paused, his crystalline form brightening slightly as he came to a decision that would have been unthinkable 50 years earlier. "I move that we send a delegation to the Free Worlds Confederation," he announced. "Not to negotiate, not to make demands, but to learn." The other council members stared at him in shock. "Learn what?" Nexus asked. "How to build something better than what we have," Velthar replied. "How to create true unity instead of enforced uniformity." As the council debated this revolutionary proposal far beyond the galactic rim, humanity continued its greatest experiment. They had proven that freedom was possible, that cooperation was stronger than control, and that the future belonged to those willing to reach for it. The humans had departed 50 years ago, choosing uncertainty over subjugation. Now as council space slowly emptied and the free worlds grew stronger, it was clear that they had not fled from civilization. They had gone ahead to build a better one, and they were waiting patiently for the rest of the galaxy to join them when they were ready. The council watched, no longer helplessly but with growing understanding, as their mistake became the seed of something greater than they had ever imagined possible.